It's that time again. Time to buy that brand new TV. Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be discussing the 4 simple things you should consider when buying a new TV. Now, this is a simplified review of different aspects and technical aspects of buying a TV. So if you are a pro or if you are an enthusiast, then definitely, there are other things that you should consider that are a little bit more technical, but really to the average person, to most people out there, they just want a great looking TV that's going to last them for years to come. Then this review of the things to look for is going to be right on the money for you guys. Plus, it's going to be generally more affordable than if you were to go all out on the highest specifications. So these are the specs that really matter, what you should look out for, making it simple for you. Let's get right into it with number 1, and that is resolution. Now, not number 1 that it's the best thing to look for. Nothing here is numbered in order of importance or anything like that, but resolution just comes to mind because a lot of people know about that and they tend to focus on that first, because that seems to be one of the most common things that people are interested in, is the resolution. Is it 4K? Is it, high definition? And let me just break it down very simply what all these numbers mean in terms of resolution. Resolution is simply the number of pixels that are embedded into a display. And it basically boils down to giving you a certain amount of clarity. The more pixels are on a display, potentially the more clear the display signal is going to be. The picture quality is going to be, when you look at it from a normal viewing distance. Now, the budget end of this resolution is 720p. That's very budget. You probably will have a hard time even finding TVs that have that kind of a low resolution, and that is because it's an older, outdated, more obsolete resolution. It's still pretty good, and honestly, a lot of people probably will be just fine with that, but 720p is the budget TVs. You're barely gonna find them. You're gonna find TVs that have the lowest level features, so I wouldn't recommend it for 2020 and beyond to get a 720p TV, but that's just to let you know where we kind of started several years ago. But now 1080p is kind of replaced 720p in what I would call the true budget category, because 720p still gives you a little bit more features, a little bit more well-rounded in terms of feature set and quality, and 1080p is gonna be more clear than 720p depending on the distance that you view it from, because it has more pixels than 720p. So the larger the number, the more pixels, the higher the resolution. But next up on the scale is 4K. 4K is what I believe is the best resolution for right now, 2020. The resolution amount that I think you're gonna be able to enjoy the most and have the best chance of viewing good quality content on without breaking the bank in terms of overpaying for something that you really don't need. I think 4K is enough. As a matter of fact, a lot of content that is out there on televisions, whether it be broadcast, cable TV, or even like stuff like Netflix or social media stuff that gets broadcast into your house, Disney Plus, Apple TV, Amazon Prime Video, all of these things are going to be viewed primarily by most people in 1080p, not even 4K. But you can pay extra in some cases, or if you're lucky enough, some of these channels or services do offer some free 4K content like YouTube and maybe some other ones that I'm leaving out. But this will change over time. I'm sure 4K will become more mainstream. But if you get a 4K TV, you're gonna cover the bases, still get 4K content when it's available, and it's gonna be great. And of course, it's backwards compatible with 1080p, so you can see all your legacy stuff that's 1080p and even lower. So it kind of covers all the bases at an affordable price, and 4K TVs, generally speaking, are going to have the widest array of options, and they're going to be the most well-rounded, and you're going to find the best array of prices, so from very affordable to ultra expensive. So 4K, I think, is the way to go as far as picking the resolution for your next television. Now, if you got the money, definitely take a look, but not necessarily jump into just yet, but take a look at it. And if you got the money, 8K. 8K is another resolution tier above 4K. It's basically the highest mainstream resolution that is available right now on TVs, in stores, in department stores and whatnot. And it is, of course, a resolution that is not popular right now with broadcast cable and different multimedia outlets, because it's just so much resolution. No movies are shot in 8K yet. That's not something that you're going to miss out if you don't have. So don't worry, if you're buying a 4K TV, you're not missing out on much. 8K is really mostly for future proofing, but in reality, if you get into that 8K TV at this point in the game, you're going to be spending a lot of money if you're going to buy an 8K TV that has the same comparable, all the bells and whistles and features of a really good 4K TV. I'd rather buy a really good 4K TV than an 8K TV with mediocre, other specs, because you're paying a lot of money for the early adopter tax, basically. Early people that buy into technology early, like 8K, especially when it's not really mainstream, you're gonna pay a little more for that. Sometimes a lot more, depending on the manufacturer and the type of television that you're going for. So don't think that you're missing out. You don't need 8K right now. I think it's overkill. I think 4K is the best. 1080 is budget. 720p is way budget. And my recommendation, 4K. Forget the 8K for now, but if you got the money, take a look at it. But they're going to be pretty expensive. Next on the list, display size. Display size is really the thing that I think most people can appreciate the most. Once you got the 4K covered, display size is basically a simple one. Keep this in mind. Very few people ever buy a TV and say, oh, I wish I would have bought a TV that was 5 inches smaller. That's very rare that someone's going to say that. When you buy a television that is a larger television, a larger display, a larger screen size, that is something everybody can appreciate. You can see the picture from farther away. You can, even when you're close up with the high resolution 4K, you're not going to be compromising you're not going to be looking at and detecting pixelation, or, because sometimes on older TVs, when you sit at a certain distance that's a little bit too close, you see the actual blockiness of the pixels. It doesn't look good. But with a 4K television, and if you have a large screen display, as long as you sit at a normal viewing distance, even on a large screen display, you're going to be fine. And the nice thing about the large screen display is if you do have a larger living room or a room where you have the TV in and people are sitting farther back, obviously the larger screen TV is going to provide a huge benefit, much more than if you had 8K. 8K is only good really if you even have 8K content, or if you're really up against the TV where you can see the difference, or unless you have a gigantic TV the size of a house, which probably you're not going to have that anytime soon. So 4K, big display size, I think that's what you want. Try to go for the biggest that you can afford. Obviously, if the next tier up in display size, for another few inches is only going to cost you another couple of $100, maybe go for that. But obviously, if you reach a point where the next threshold up above in display size costs you, $1,000 more, then probably don't do that. That's not worth it. But definitely try to get the most that you can afford within your budget category of the 4K TV type format. Next on the list is something that a lot of people don't even think about, but it affects how you view the television, and more importantly, how the people around you and that are with you view the screen quality. Because this has to do with the accuracy of the colors and the picture quality when viewing the screen from anything other than dead center. So I'm talking about when you're viewing TV from off axis, That's what I'm talking about here. And this category of things to look out for is called viewing angles. Now, viewing angles are very important because a lot of people assume that when you sit in front of a TV, that's what you got to look for. You sit in front of a TV, it looks good, you're good to go. Not necessarily. TVs are not created equal, and displays are not created equal. Some televisions have better viewing angles. So for example, if you're in a living room, and this is a practical example, if you're in a living room environment on a couch, you got people sitting to the left of you and to the right of you. Depending on how far to the left and to the right, even if it's just a little, some televisions suffer from relatively poor viewing angles, and it may make a difference in the experience that people get watching content in your house when they're next to you as opposed to sitting right in front of the TV, depending on where they sit. So whoever sits in front of the TV, they may have a different viewing experience than somebody that's sitting off axis. So definitely when you are in the stores, pay attention to the television, not only standing right in front of it, but go off to the side a little bit at an off-axis angle, mimicking the situation at home. If somebody will be sitting, 2-3 people to the right of you, and try to see if the picture quality gets darker or overly bright, or the colors shift in an unappealing way, or if the image quality deteriorates in any way that you find unacceptable. Definitely look out for that, because there are a lot of good 4K TVs, big screen TVs that are 4K that have good viewing angles, and some of them that are a little bit more cheaper, budget-friendly TVs, but they sacrifice on viewing angles because a lot of people don't know to look out for that. That's not something that stands out. They just look at resolution, 4K, and that it's a huge TV, the number of inches of the display, but very few people pay attention to viewing angles. So definitely look out for that, guys. That's going to ensure that the viewing experience is good for everybody on the couch that's viewing the content in your home. Next is HDR, high dynamic range. This one here is something that has been coming on strong recently, and this is important, I think, even more so than 8K resolution right now, because HDR is something that anybody can appreciate, especially if you're just an average person. When you look at an 8K, a true 8K content, then you can notice the difference in the realism, the quality of the way the image displays the bright parts of the scene, like a bright sky with the clouds, and the darker shadow areas of the scene, like maybe the foreground, or maybe some shadow objects that are sitting a little bit of shadow, or any content that is not part of like the highlights, the bright part of the display. So that differential between the shadow detail and the highlight detail, the very bright parts of the display, is very well preserved when you have a TV that can accept and display an HDR format, high dynamic range. Now, to look out for this, guys, you want to make sure that you look out for HDR format. They have different standards. Unfortunately, there's not just one standard. Different televisions have different standards of what they call it, and there are different, just global standards for the HDR type of format in and of itself. So some of it is called Dolby Vision, and some of it is called just HDR, high dynamic range. You're gonna have to look into that. This terminology can change over time as an HDR format is maybe more mainstream adopted and takes over. But just keep in mind, when you're at the at the store looking at TVs, either ask the salesman or look for any language on the TV where it indicates that it is HDR capable. Very, very important. So guys, hope you got something out of this video, and I will see you in the next one.